Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're getting ourselves organized for the live chat on pop culture. We have our guests in the backstage. I'm just going to ask Gloria if you wouldn't mind turning on your camera for us as we're preparing ourselves. And in a moment, we're just going to be going live officially. So thank you so much for everyone that's joining us. We'll be back in just one moment. All right. I think we're just going to start real fast. I'm going to bring all our guests on stage right now. So thank you so much to Omar, Raj, and Gloria for joining us today. I'm going to get right into the introduction of the event, and we'll explain exactly what's going on right now. So we're so glad that you're joining us today for this session that we're calling Vitiligo and Pop Culture. We're streaming live right now on YouTube and LinkedIn. We had a bit of a problem with Instagram. Unfortunately, this Instagram are not cooperating today, according to our tech. Um, but my name is Richard Pietro, and I work for Skinopathy, a medical AI company that's created technology that can help people with vitiligo manage their vitiligo. And this conversation is a lead-up event as part of the 2025 World Vitiligo Day Innovation Summit that's taking place on June 25 in Toronto. And we're organizing alongside the Vitiligo Research Foundation and Vitiligo Voices Canada. So if you haven't already, we invite you to register for the event, either in person or for the live stream at worldvitiligoday.ca. And there's still time to register. So none of this would be possible without our incredible partners. So a heartfelt thank you to Insight and to Xanderm and to Edessa Biotech. So thank you for making the summit happen and for making this conversation possible. So why are we here today? It's because vitiligo affects over 100 million people worldwide, and it's still very much misunderstood. In some places, it's known as the Michael Jackson disease. It's a nickname that brings visibility, but also reinforces stereotypes. And how vitiligo is portrayed in music and movies and fashion and even video games is more important than ever. And so today we're going to explore that portrayal across cultures, across continents, and through personal experiences. And we're going to ask, what does real representation look like and why does it matter? And we're joined by three incredible voices. And start off first, we have from Nigeria, Gloria Chidiebere. Gloria, how do you pronounce your name correctly? I've always messed it up in the past.
It's pronounced Gloria. You're correct.
Okay. Thank you so much, Gloria. And Gloria is the partnership lead at Lift for Citizens Development and Advancement. And she's the lead advocate with the Vitiligo Awareness and Support Project. And from the United States, I ask that you please welcome Raj Selvaraj. He's a student at the University of Florida, and he's also the secretary of the Political Science Honor Society at the University of Florida. And he's also a rising voice in vitiligo advocacy and inclusion. Hello, Raj.
Hello, thank you so much for finally, putting this together. I'm so excited after so much work to finally get started on this conversation, and I'm just excited to see what happens. Thank you.
No problem. And from Canada, we're joined by Omar Sharife, who is the co-founder of Vitiligo Voices Canada. He's also a model reshaping how vitiligo is seen in the fashion and media world. And each of these guests bring a very unique lens to the conversation, whether it be cultural, personal.
I'm trying to edit it.
Oh, I think Gloria, we can hear you right now. So we're gonna get going into the conversation, which is, oh, Gloria, I think we might be hearing your radio in your background, quite possibly. All right. So really, this conversation was born out of 3 different conversations. We'll start with the first 2. Gloria, you told me that in Nigeria and other parts of the world, sometimes vitiligo is viewed as witchcraft, and that is some kind of supernatural curse. Omar, you told me that we don't really like to talk about it as the Michael Jackson disease, and it's not really so much appreciated that way in Canada. We've lost Gloria. I'm sure she'll be able to join us in a moment. But Gloria, she had told me that if vitiligo was known as the Michael Jackson disease in Nigeria, it would help them make it more normal and accepted. I'm going to put it out there. Let's start right there. Like, how do we resolve this? How do we talk about vitiligo across cultures that way? And I'm going to throw it to you, Omar, first.
It's an interesting one. And it kind of raises this word that I've heard previously and I've spoken about previously, is about this idea of environmental stigma, meaning kind of where you are. So, if you're in North America, mental health is something that you're more likely able to talk about a little bit. And I've heard this about, African countries and witchcraft and curses, and similar to, being in India, where women struggle to potentially get married and things like that. So I don't know if I know the answers to how to solve that, but it definitely highlights that, the stigma kind of depends on where you are and what your surroundings are.
Raj, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. You're a bit younger, of course, than both me and Omar, but how is that stigma, that conversation looking like in your world?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, as we've established earlier, this is a stigma that is not only historical, but also promoted in pop culture. I feel like one of the biggest issues is, vitiligans, as we're called, a very small community. So it's hard to get representation out there and to get it done correctly. A lot of times it's done, in bad faith or, misinterpreted to what the disease actually is. And obviously the solution to that is to sort of, bring out more representation and bring out more of the voices and put them in the forefront. But yeah, so far, when it comes to those myths around vitiligo, a lot of them are just based in ignorance, but they're also based somewhat in tradition and culture, as we're going to discuss. I believe Gloria is going to speak on this, but yeah, it definitely has a long history. That's for sure.
Definitely. And we're joined again by Gloria. And again, Gloria is actually in Nigeria. So full credit to her for making the effort and joining us. Obviously, the infrastructure can be a little choppy sometimes. But we're asking Gloria about this thing about how it's known as the Michael Jackson disease in some parts of the world. In Canada, it's perhaps not the best way to talk about it. But you had told me that it would be great if people knew that it was called the Michael Jackson disease in your parts, because it would probably be more accepted. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh yes, first of all, sorry for the network. It's a network issue. I'm sorry about that. So here in Nigeria, when we tell people about vitiligo, we probably explain it to them using the Michael Jackson disease. So it makes it feel like, oh, at least someone who is well known in the world sometimes has had the disease. So it makes people a kind of accept it the more. It helps us explain it better to people. And people can relate to it when you say Michael Jackson's disease, because a lot of people don't know the word vitiligo. But when you say Michael Jackson, it makes it more relatable. You get.
And I'm curious actually, because obviously I don't have vitiligo myself, but within your own community, how do you guys talk about it in terms of like, we need to get more accepted? Like, how do you, within your own selves, how do you like to talk about vitiligo and in the lens and the context? Like, can you, Omar, maybe take that question to start us off?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a really interesting one, because everybody's on their own journey, right? There were moments where You know, if you caught me a couple years ago, the last thing I want to talk about is vitiligo because it's so raw and emotional for me, where, you know, even the first time speaking about it is really, really challenging. So yeah, I think it's a really difficult one. Even if I think about, you know, walking down the street and seeing somebody else with vitiligo, you kind of naturally want to say hi, but there's this kind of unspoken sort of, let me give them their space. If they invite me in to have a conversation, then we can do that. I think that's kind of the challenge with it, is everybody's at a different point with it. So one thing might work for me and be okay for you to talk about with me or approach me in a certain way, or even when somebody's referring to Michael Jackson, for example, as if that is how they describe vitiligo. For somebody like me, that might not bother me. It might, you know, brush it off my shoulder. It's haha, it's the joke that everybody says. But other people might find it really, really challenging because there's a lot of connotations with, especially Michael Jackson, in terms of the controversy that he had outside of his own skin condition. So yeah, those are my thoughts on that.
Is that something, Raj, that resonates with you? Like, it was weird the way Omar said it. Like, again, I'm not part of the community, but the way Omar said it, sometimes, like, I don't know if I should approach another person with vitiligo because we share something that's common. Is that how you feel as well?
Yes, definitely. And I really wanted to add on to that. For sure, yes, I definitely love seeing people with vitiligo out and about. But I also understand that not everyone has the same access to resources and education. So some people might feel ashamed about it. Some people might make an effort to cover it up. And sometimes for those people, talking to them about it might actually trigger some harsh memories or some trauma in their lives. So as much as I want to say hi, I tend to wait for them to bring it up or notice it on me, and then we have that conversation. But yeah, as much as I'd love to have, you know, be able to talk to people with disease just off the bat, I understand that some memories of vitiligo might be linked with some trauma, and to be sensitive about that. For
That's
sure.
fascinating. Yeah. Gloria, what about those in your communities? Like, does that also resonate with you as well? That, or is it an issue of like, we need power in numbers? We need to find everybody and bring them in because we have such a much taller mountain to climb?
So for us here, for myself, I don't have vitiligo, but for people around us here in Nigeria, when we see them, you have to kind of, there's a way you want to approach them, and some of them don't even want to talk about it at all. Some of them don't even want to, they don't want the topic to be brought up at all, because of course it's understandable. They are yet to understand why they are looking the way they are looking. Well, there are some people who have understood themselves. There are some people who have understood that this is me. So of course we can just get into talking about it all at once. There's a scenario that happened, I think 3 weeks ago. I think I met about 2 persons with vitiligo, my colleagues and I. So when we saw the first person that Sunday, wanted to speak to her, and we were like, "Hi, is this vitiligo?" She was like, she didn't want to talk about it. So we are like, okay, we just greeted her and we went our way. But then when we, like, a few minutes later, we met a second person. We was like, is this vitiligo? And she was like, yes. She was excited to talk about it. You know, she grew up with it. She said she had vitiligo all her life. So she was excited to talk about it. She explained her journey to us and all. And then we're able to, we had that conversation, and then we're able to just bring her into our community, right? So for some people, they have accepted it, but some people are yet to accept it, and that is what we are working on. We're working on those ones who are yet to accept their skin color condition.
This actually really echoes what Omar was saying, is that everyone's kind of like on their own personal journey when it comes to this kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And one of the things, Gloria, that I want to bring to everybody else again is how you told me that someone with vitiligo might walk down the street in your community and they'll be called things like, and I don't know if this is, and I do apologize, I don't know if this is an actual slur or not, but they'll be called like zebras or zebras as you pronounce them, and they'll be thrown like these, like, you know, get like voodoo magic and witchcraft and things along those lines. I was shocked to hear this when you were sharing it with me, but apparently, and Omar, you're very worldly as well. You've been part of these conversations. Like what's, I mean, obviously it's not a good thing to hear when you're hearing those things, but what are you guys doing to change that, almost like that hatred, it seems like, towards people with vitiligo in your community, Gloria?
A lot is actually going on. So for us, is all about creating awareness, and awareness. We're trying to let them know, first of all, that this is just a skin condition, and as a matter of fact, is an autoimmune condition. Okay, it can happen to anybody and at any time. So we are just campaigning, letting people know about what vitiligo is, because people who behave in that manner don't know what the sickness is, and they think it is contagious. Some people look at it as a spiritual problem. They look at it as maybe is God punishing somebody for their sin, or maybe the sin of their forefathers or something like that, and that is why they have that kind of reaction.
That's
But
wild.
letting them understand what the vitiligo is, letting them understand the word, first of all, understand that this thing you're seeing here can happen to anybody. Doesn't matter your age, doesn't matter your skin color. It can happen to the blacks, it can happen to the white persons. So that awareness that we are creating, that education, that's how we are trying to make people accept what vitiligo is here, over
Raj,
here.
You're obviously a dark-skinned individual who lives in Florida and down south in the United States. Um, Gloria mentioned some very strong language a moment ago, which is like, at least in some parts of the world, vitiligo can be viewed as a curse from God, that you did something wrong in a previous life. But obviously, you being a dark-skinned individual in the south of the United States, especially right now, like, can you um, oh, can you speak to that a little bit in terms of, you know, your personal experiences?
Yeah, of course. I mean, in the US, it's a little bit different when it comes to, any kinds of comments like that. I haven't heard many of, those kinds of comments about being cursed or anything like that. But there is sort of a social stigma around it, definitely some eye glances here and there, or some people will look at you a little too long. That's just like run of the mill when you have vitiligo, especially when it's exposed on your face. Like, I don't know if it's showing, but I have it, here on my eyes and on my hands and whatnot. So people will always give you a look and all that. Um, and then, I definitely, I'm very lucky to be living in this day and age where it's definitely a more common thing to see it and to understand what it is. But just like one of the things that, because, vitiligo is genetic, and, people in my family have struggled with, coming to terms with it and understanding that now we live in a more accepting time, and that they don't exactly have to be ashamed of their spots or who they are anymore. And I do my best to live that on a daily basis, to not let the looks bother me. But it's different for every person. And for sure, in the United States, there's definitely it's definitely different. I haven't seen much of people getting yelled at, but it's more of like a quiet sort of bias that people have in their heads, where they look at you, or they treat you a little differently. And then sometimes you'll get people that ask you questions directly. I've gotten, "Are you a burn victim? Um, is your skin like stained?" Those kinds of questions. I always try to go through them with a cool head, and you can tell that those questions come from a genuine interest knowledge to understand what it is. So I always try to lead with a cool head in those situations, but definitely I resonate with what Gloria is talking about for sure on some level.
Gloria, just so you know, I'm muting you occasionally simply because we're hearing a lot of feedback, and actually I got some comments from some of my team members on the other side. So I'll unmute whenever you want to speak. Just raise your hand and let us know, and we'll definitely unmute you. But we're hearing that background noise. I want to throw this to Omar because Omar, you've taught me so much as we've been organizing World Vitiligo Day, and I want to hearken to what Raj was saying in terms of the looks you get. One of the first things you told me, and it still affects me, is you were telling me that even people with vitiligo, they don't like to go out to dinner, right? Like just going out to the restaurant and grabbing a meal without feeling the intensity of people's eyes on you. I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that, because what you're doing is you're really trying to normalize vitiligo, at least in Canada and other parts of the world, by being a model, by showing like I'm embracing my beauty and the way I am as other things. I'd like for you to talk about that a little bit and your work.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, part of the battle with vitiligo is just showing up, right? And just showing off your skin, and having people that you can look up to or that you can see that are doing that. So that really empowers me to do what I'm doing and showing up in the way that I do. When I spoke about restaurants, I want to clarify, because that's not generalizing for everybody. That was a specific social anxiety of my own. So I spent a number of years, I've had vitiligo for over 25 years now. And it really only appeared on my face to this level 5 or 6 years ago. So for a number of years, for probably 20 years, I was able to create sort of rules that allowed me to feel a little bit more comfortable. Wearing long sleeve shirts, not necessarily wearing short sleeve shirts in summer, wearing shorts, in the dead of summer, even though it's hot. Those are the kind of things that I allowed myself to create, was rules. But when it started on my face and it started to be as visible as it is, those rules no longer worked for me. And undoing those rules or unteaching myself those rules was a long journey. And part of that led into social anxiety. And for me, my biggest challenge was being in a restaurant. I would walk into a restaurant and literally break out into a sweat, because that was the one place that you're kind of trapped, in the sense that you sit down and people can stare at you from anywhere, and you are expected to sit at your table, right? Like, you're there to eat. What are you going to do? Get up and move every time you feel uncomfortable? And actually that just really exacerbated it for me. I would sit down, I would start sweating, and then I would try and wipe off the sweat, because I'm like, they can't see me, but it was so much sweat that it was like sweating through my shirt. And it was a big, long undoing for me. And I still have, in the first instance, those rules or those anxieties that throw up for me. So if I walk into a restaurant, I will still feel that first instant feeling of, oh my God, that anxiety. But I've learned to tell myself that it's okay. And I'm certain there's other people with vitiligo that have their own rules or own coping mechanisms that allow them to function on a daily basis. I've said to a lot of people recently, and actually it's only been recently that I've kind of figured this out for myself, is that, like, for me, I've been struggling to figure out, why does it feel so difficult for me sometimes when I'm walking outside? Why is it such a burden just to go to the post office, kind of thing? And I realized that, people will stare. They are inquisitive, they're curious, they want to know. They haven't seen me before, they haven't seen it before, it looks different on everybody else. So that's one thing that I've kind of got to accept, is that no matter what, people are going to stare. And that takes energy. That takes energy for me to step out of the house and realize that I've got to have an extra layer than other people do, just to do the day-to-day things that I need to do. And in addition to that, I've realized that, I used to think, why do people not look at me in the eyes? Or why do they, like, when they see me, their glance goes away? And I've kind of realized that there is this split second awkward energy anytime I meet anybody new. Anytime anybody sees me for the very first time, they're going to have that split second of, oh, wait a second, he looks different. I know that's going to happen every single time, which means I've got to prepare myself every single time. And I've got to absorb that energy every single time, no matter what. I've got to absorb that energy, whether the response after that split second is positive or negative. I still got to wait for that split second, hey, he looks different, before I even get the opportunity to say hello.
That's interesting, because you don't, again, with someone without vitiligo, obviously, you don't think about it that way, that every time you're meeting someone, it's another small battle with yourself, with the interaction. And there's a lot of people in the world. You got to interact, business, family, friends, all that kind of stuff. You're meeting new people. And actually, that's where I want to shift the conversation. This is a conversation about vitiligo and pop culture, and there's a new shift in conversation that's taking place. And I'm going to put up an image that I'm assuming at least a few of you have seen before, including in the audience. It's this. A number of years ago, someone on Instagram created a filter to show people how they would look like with vitiligo, like a normal skin individual. I don't know if that's even the right word. I do apologize if I'm using the wrong word, but someone that does not have vitiligo, how they would look like with vitiligo. And obviously the vitiligo community did not appreciate the filter. I'm going to throw it to Gloria first. Gloria, I'm not sure if you actually, let me ask the question differently. Gloria, Raj, Omar, do you know about this filter?
Yes, I've heard of it.
Me too.
Gloria?
I've heard of it as well.
So let's go to Gloria first. And obviously, I don't know how popular Instagram is or social media platforms are in Nigeria, because I'm just that ignorant, unfortunately. But is that something that would harken back to, like, it would actually help normalize vitiligo in Nigeria if we had something like this?
Oh, yes. Apps like that can help normalize vitiligo. It can help tell people, like, create a picture of what it looks like for those who have not seen it before. Can help tell the story. So yeah, sure, apps like that can help. We're able to publicize it, let people know that, okay, when you see something like this is probably what it is called. It is probably called vitiligo. It can help tell the story. It help represent what vitiligo is.
And Raj and Omar, I know that the reaction from, we'll call it the North American audience that saw it at first, that had vitiligo, the reaction was more along the lines of, like, this is not something to be trifled with. It's not a novelty, right? It's something that, like Omar said a moment ago, it's like something I battle with every day whenever I go outside my house, right? And again, this conversation is about the cultural differences on the conversation on vitiligo and what does real representation look like. Raj, I want to bring it to your attention real quick here, which is, I'd love to know your reaction when you saw the filter, and maybe is there a better way of doing it to help perhaps the conversation along, as opposed to make it more as a novelty?
Of course. Yeah. Well, first, before we get into that question, I do want to thank Omar for sharing his story. It's stories like that that make it easier for us to feel normal and to feel accepted and to feel, proud of who we are. And you can't do that without sharing stories like that. So thank you. As far as it goes for the filter, that is a very interesting situation. My first reaction to it was, I feel like it's sort of trying on a health condition. And it feels like, dare I say, it feels like it's like, sort of like you said, commodifying it and making it feel like a costume or like a cosmetic touch up, when it's really not. It's kind of the opposite. for most vitiligans. So when it comes to the filter, I do think that it is definitely a poor way to do representation. I personally think that just a filter in and of itself is very problematic to have. I think personally a better way, like if you really had to do a filter, maybe link it to a vitiligo charity or put like, vitiligo foundation stuff on there so that people know where it comes from. But honestly, I would stay away from the filter altogether because it is very problematic. And it leads to sort of people thinking less of what vitiligo looks like. It's just a filter, it's just a camera. But people have to live with this on a daily basis. When you wake up in the morning and you get ready, you got to see it. And it's not just like it makes it seem like ephemeral, like it's just, I can try it on and take it off. But I feel like it does do a disservice to the community as a whole. And I think that is a very poor way of representing the condition. There's many different ways to do it. One of my favorite ways actually that I think I shared with you when we were setting up was, children's drawings. They're really cute when I see those little drawings of kids or, like they're very much like stylized in that way, but they have people with vitiligo on them, or like video game characters with vitiligo, or, action figures, Barbie dolls, etc. I think that's a very great way to do it, but a filter is really not the best way to go about it.
Actually, let's talk about that for a moment. I'm going to go to you next, Omar. I'm not sure how much of a gamer you are, but yes, Raj was telling me about some of the games you can create your own skin. I'm going to show one right now. This is from the game The Sims, where you're simulating a life and you're simulating a family and things along those lines. And now Raj was telling me in some different games, like before I didn't have someone that looked like me or that had the depigmentation of their skin. And I just was fascinated that this was happening. But it's strange how it's different when it's an IG filter that someone creates to show skin on their face, but in a game it's okay. And I'm not quite sure how to resolve that in my own head in terms of, because obviously I'm as white as it gets. Actually, the jokes I get is, don't you ever go outside? And my entire life, that's been the joke. You just stay in the basement all your life. And what's going on here, right? And in this context, we have a filter that was created by a third party to show how it looked like to have vitiligo on you. In the Sims context, it's like it's a gaming type of setup. I don't know, Omar, when you're seeing this, like, what are some of your reactions? What are your thoughts?
It's an interesting one as well. And it goes again to this idea that everybody is kind of at a different journey or at a different place in their vitiligo journey, and everybody feels a little bit different about it. Even in my own advocacy work, we've kind of I've got an idea of what I would love to see in terms of the things that would help me, but we've got to meet people where they're at. And some people are at a different journey. When I think of this filter, first off, I think one, flattering, hey, that people are recognizing vitiligo and want to do something with it. But it's not representation when it's a filter, because everybody's vitiligo looks different. And it shows up differently. And that's an unfair way to have somebody try it on because they can take it off, but they also don't have the backstory behind the actual journey that it's taken to get there, whether that's the failed treatments or the treatments that have worked, or the years of ridicule or whatever it might be, or the years of dealing with their own self-esteem and social anxiety. So being able to take a filter on and off just doesn't sit well with me. And it also kind of reminds me again of my own personal journey. Years ago when I was going through therapy, one of the things that I was told to do before it actually showed up on my face, because one of my big worries was that it was going to show up on my face, hey, why don't you go home and put makeup on and kind of try and paint on what you think it might look like so that you can look at that and desensitize yourself to it. And I did that. I don't think that ever worked, because if I look back at those pictures now, that's not what my vitiligo turned out to be. So again, the filter, yeah, I'm not sure. When it comes to the video game, I feel like it leans a little bit towards representation, because it is a video game. These are characters. If we can show a little bit about, you know, the differences in people and the visual differences, then it goes some way to addressing and bringing visibility to the condition. So I think there's a clear difference between this filter that people can take and put on and play with, when it's not really something to be played with. But when it comes to the game, it's a little bit more along the lines of representation, I think.
That's fascinating. And Gloria, go ahead, Raj. Yeah, please go ahead, Raj.
Yes, just real quick, to answer your previous question of the differences of representation, like Omar said, one of the key problems with the filter is that you can take it on and take it off, and that is very problematic. But one of the representations, like you put up with The Sims, the key components of the Sims video game is that, you know, you watch your characters live their lives. You watch them go to get groceries. You watch them hang out with each other, cook food, you know, get up in the morning, all those things. And I'm not exactly sure how in-depth the representation is in The Sims, but I'm sure there must be some sort of you can definitely see a real person, quote unquote, living their lives with vitiligo and what that actually looks like. What does it look like when they go out on a hot day and they have to wear, you know, they have to wear sunscreen? You know, those little things that we have to do as people with vitiligo. A filter doesn't really capture all of that, and it doesn't educate the way that a game can educate. You know, seeing people go with their vitiligo with, you know, different kinds of clothes on, that's just daily life for us people with vitiligo, and a filter cannot capture that, but a game like The Sims can. So I just want to add that onto that as well.
Just to add to that, actually, it makes me think also, you mentioned about like the things that we have to do as people with vitiligo in terms of, you know, I live close to the beach and my friends are always going to the beach, and it's like,
Same.
okay, I'm not going to be there, and I don't even need to explain it, or I don't even care to explain it. I just can't be out in the sun for that. I wonder if we're speaking of representation of The Sims, and cool that there is representation, but and I'm just wildly throwing this out, but what if in The Sims game, when they walked past somebody, they would get stared at, or somebody would step back and be like, oh my God, or, you know, when they go to the beach, they've got a big umbrella and a big bucket of SPF, right? Like maybe addressing some of those issues would be kind of cool to see. I don't think that would happen. But, you know, if it wanted to be a little more real life as to what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, who knows? Maybe the next version of the game.
Of course, this is all part of a larger, you know, effort to build real, authentic vitiligo representation. While it is great that The Sims does have this as an option, it is just a start. You know, there's definitely the daily life things that vitiligans have to do to protect themselves, and I hope in the future The Sims will consider adding those into the game. But I'm just glad that at least we have that as a great stepping stone to build off of. You know, many games don't even have that at the minimum. But yes, definitely, I think it would be interesting if there would be features like that added for people with vitiligo. For now, I think it is just a cosmetic thing that they added. But still, it's very, it's different than just a filter. Like I was saying, you can see people live their lives with vitiligo in The Sims, at least aesthetically. And that is just so important for a community that, you know, like Gloria said, used to be treated as cursed or like, you know, otherized. So that's just a great first step in the right direction.
Gloria, I'd love to hear from you a little bit. Obviously, I'm not sure how popular gaming is in Nigeria with PS4s and computers and things along those lines, but I'm assuming there are things that you and your group are doing and have done to help normalize the conversation. You mentioned earlier awareness programs and education, but are there anything that you found that has been particularly impactful in making vitiligo more accepted in where you live?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite get your question. The line was breaking.
Yeah, so we're talking about how there's some games that are showing vitiligo in other ways, right? That are giving some level of representation. And Omar said, like, there's even more. What if we make it more difficult for them or get other Sims to stare at someone with vitiligo to really give that experience? And I'm wondering for you, like, I don't know how popular gaming is where you live in Nigeria, but what is it that you guys have done that has been really impactful in getting the message out there? You mentioned education and awareness, but has there been like a big thing that has really helped?
Oh, first of all, gaming is quite popular in
It
Nigeria.
is.
Nigeria is not such a hot area. Yeah. Gaming is quite popular in Nigeria. So, and then I think it's something that will be accepted. But again, for us in Lift for Citizens Development and Advancement, aside the education, which is basically what we've been doing, we for now we just want people to understand what the skin condition is. That's basically what we've been doing. I don't know if we mentioned this in our previous conversation when we told you about the hike that we did, the vitiligo awareness hike. Yeah, so we had over 80 persons there. So it was still more about education. Oh, yeah, education, creating awareness. But Nigeria is still trying to understand what vitiligo is. So,
Yeah, and I think it starts small, right? And obviously, Omar, Raj, you guys are on your.
sorry,
Oh, go ahead, Gloria. Yeah.
it's okay. And then right now, there's this arts campaign that we are doing to mark the World Vitiligo Day. Yeah, so we are bringing people to have a to to do a picture of what they think vitiligo is. Yeah, to do like a visual painting of of what they think about vitiligo. So currently, that's what we are doing, and people are coming up with arts. We are looking at them, and they are really wonderful. We are really amazed with what we can see, and then a lot of things are going on. Artists are engaging, and maybe by 25th of June, you guys will get to see what our Nigerian um our Nigerian group here has done. The art campaign is really ongoing, and people are sending in their visual works, and it's really amazing. So
Oh, I can't wait to see it myself. And in fact, actually, I'm going to throw it to Raj in a moment because I don't know if you have it on your desk right now, but Gloria, like you're so right. Arts is an emotional journey as opposed to just being factual and logic and education and things along those lines. So I really do believe that the arts can really bring this out. But Raj, we talked about this, was it 6 weeks ago? And you told me that you have, well, you explain it. You know where I'm going with it. I want you to
I
explain
do,
it.
I do. Unfortunately, I don't have it on me, but I would love to describe it for you all. I have on my desk a brown rubber duck, my desk at home, a little mini brown rubber duck, and I decided because it's a rubber duck and it's brown, so I was like, why not paint? I used some whiteout to actually paint in some vitiligo on it. And I was like, now this duck looks like me. It's just one of the little examples of what we can do as people with vitiligo to sort of normalize it ourselves, right? And it's just a little reminder of how far I've come. I've made it a really important point to embrace my vitiligo and to never hide it. When it comes to situations like Omar was describing, where you can feel people staring at you or people are inquisitive, what I've learned through working through this in therapy is to actually view myself as an ambassador of vitiligo. The same way how if someone asks you about your culture, you're more than happy to talk about it. When someone asks me about my vitiligo, I'm very excited to discuss it with people, and I make it a point to recognize that 90% of the time, it genuinely comes out of a place of curiosity, because it's something people have never seen before in their lives or have limited knowledge of. So I make it a point personally to, keep myself informed on what's going on with vitiligo, but also to know some common mythbusters. Everyone here knows that vitiligo is not contagious, but you'd be surprised how many people think that it is contagious. So like little things like that when it comes to, navigating life. I'm very proud of my vitiligo. I'm very proud to discuss it with other people, but I know that's not the case for everyone. It takes a lot of hard work and but definitely it's just a little visual reminder for myself when I go to my desk to just see, little Vitiligo ducky, and it's like, oh, that's me right there. That's what I look like to the outside world, and it's just literally like a, what's the word, affirmation to just sort of keep myself, afloat.
Do you have any tricks like that yourself, Omar, that you've created for yourself?
To sort of manage my day-to-day?
Yeah, a little bit like the rubber ducky example that sort of grounds Raj in his life that way.
I mean, I've got a tattoo that says "I am not my skin."
Oh.
That's something that has helped me. Yeah.
That's pretty neat. Well, is it in a place where you can show it on screen right now?
Yeah. It's not in English though. It's in Arabic. Wait, there we go.
Oh, there, yeah.
Sorry, trying to get the right angle to be able to show it. But yeah, it's in Arabic. I have a Muslim background, so I learned how to read Arabic when I was younger. And I think when I did the tattoo, it was for me, but I also didn't want to put my insecurity in English. And people, when they've seen that tattoo, have thought, "Oh, that's really cool. What's that about?" And then I can explain it if I want to.
And if there's anything that, at least for a person like me, that comes out of this conversation is like, I'm going to use a bad pun here, but don't paint everybody with the same brush, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's vitiligo journey is unique. They're in their own stages. And in fact, those are the things we're going to explore at the World Vitiligo Day Summit in Toronto. We're going to be live streaming it. So there's going to be a lot more content on this. And like you mentioned camouflage, I learned about Lee Thomas, who is popular newscaster for a network called PBS. And apparently he's like, when he's on camera, he uses camouflage, but in his personal life, he does not typically use camouflage. And again, it's very personal, it's very unique based on different situations. I want to start thinking about closing out the conversation. This is, again, about what does real representation look like, and what does the role of pop culture play in that representation? We talked about Michael Jackson, we talked about modeling, we talked about witchcraft. We've gone a lot of different places, but I want to open the floor to you guys in terms of what you think pop culture can do in the conversation moving forward. Is it more people embracing sort of the body positivity? Is it more about education? We need to get this out there, very similar to what the, say, LGBTQ sort of community has done around the conversation. I'd love for you guys to share your thoughts on what can be done from a pop culture perspective to move the conversation forward. And I'm going to start with Omar first.
I've got a few thoughts on this. So we talked about this filter. Another thing that that kind of reminds me of, there was a Jamie Foxx movie where they painted vitiligo on him for his character, which to me doesn't make any sense, because what was the point of that? I guess if I'm thinking, and the reason that I raise that is because I also am sort of pursuing acting and things like that. And it's very much a world of what image they think will fit with that particular character. But vitiligo doesn't have a character in that way. And just because we have vitiligo doesn't mean I can't be the cool guy driving the BMW in the commercial. So I think in terms of the media world and pop culture, one, we need real people with vitiligo to be actors and to be models. And we also need to not just show up in a Dove commercial, because that is specifically related to skin. Like I said, I mentioned the BMW commercial. I mentioned, like, why are we not in those normal everyday things? Because I think that is the representation that we need. We need to see what it's like for somebody to live their life normally with vitiligo, and for the world around them to sort of accept them and embrace them being in that position.
That's a great call. Now, when you're seeing a lot more of that, at least in Western ads and Western movies, where you're seeing like a a telecommunication commercial with a family that has maybe like a black dad and a white mom or something along those lines. And it's just like, this is the way it is. It's just, we're not calling attention to it. It's just, that's what life is. And essentially, I think that's what you're talking about a little bit, Omar, is just put it in there.
Representing, but also not doing it in a way that we are the token. Because as you mentioned, there's a lot of, I remember after Black Lives Matters, a lot of the commercials, you saw less white people. There were much more ethnic people being showed on these commercials, to the point that it was like, I get it. Okay, cool. You're creating a space for us, but now it's inauthentic because even, what was it? The Little Mermaid, the newest movie, every one of her sisters is a different color. Like that might be a little bit overboard. So I get the intention, and I don't mean to knock the intention, but there should be a little bit more thought about not just being a token person with vitiligo as representation.
Yeah. Raj.
Definitely. Of course. I mean, there's definitely a lot more, as we've established throughout this conversation, that can be done to represent vitiligo people authentically. That's definitely an important one, like Omar was saying. I didn't know that people with vitiligo were typecast in that way, to sort of have their character or identity revolve around their skin. So that's definitely a very interesting point. One of the things that I've personally advocated for is kind of similar for what Omar was talking about, is just more representation of vitiligo in itself, that is authentic, that is genuine, and that comes from a genuine place. Not to make a dollar or to sell a toy. It comes from an actual place of understanding the community. And the easiest way to do that, like Omar said, is to put those people on the screen, in the writing room, in those conversation rooms all over the place. That's the easiest way to understand that. I know it's a very difficult task, because like we've established, vitiligo is a very personal journey for everyone. But one of the people with vitiligo deserve the right to live their lives ordinarily, right? To go out and about in society without feeling judged or different or otherwise. That is the ultimate goal of representation. And in order to do that, you need to depict vitiligo people like that. Our identity is an important part of us, but it's not the only thing. And I feel like more authentic representations of people with vitiligo is the goal, whether it's in video games or, like, for example, like we established here in this conversation. Yes, it's great that The Sims has characters with vitiligo cosmetically, but obviously that's a great first step. There still needs to be more work done to figure out what is it like for someone who actually lives with vitiligo. What measures do they have to take to protect themselves? One of the things I always get when I'm out with my friends on the beach, like Omar was saying, is that I have to lather on extra sunscreen or high SPF sunscreen. And it's little things like that that are important to depict, so that people understand and are educated on how people with vitiligo live their lives. And if we can strive towards that, that would definitely make our community a better place, and to make sure that no one ever has to go through life hating their skin or hating themselves or feeling like they have to cover themselves up. Yeah, that's the ultimate goal of representation, and I hope that we can achieve that through movements like this and discussions like this.
It's actually something you taught me as well, Raj, about the type of sunscreen you use is actually dark.
Yes.
Because people obviously with darker skin, I'm learning, they don't want the white cast, like a sunscreen that you put on your skin. For me, you will not see the white cast. If anything, it'll just sort of, blend in very easily. But with people with darker skin, it literally lightens your shade. Yes. And there's not a lot of products, like sunscreen products, out there that don't have that white cast. There's a few, but it's not everywhere. Right. So no, I think, it's small things like that go a long way. And I want to throw it to Gloria to sort of, again, that, like, what is it that could be done from a pop culture perspective to help you in Nigeria in the conversation you're having to make, again, sort of vitiligo more, accepted?
Shaping the presenter.
Sorry, Gloria. I think we've got a bad connection with you right now. Do you mind starting from the beginning? Maybe you can kill your. Oh, sorry, Gloria. I'm going to ask you to kill your video. It's okay. You can. You'll still be on. We just won't be able to see you, but we will be able to hear you. Oh. All right, there you go. So, do you mind just you can disable your video feed, and I think we'll have a
Can
better.
you hear me, please?
Yeah, we can hear you now, but you're very choppy.
Okay. So, okay, sorry. For us here in Nigeria, or for me personally, first, I think pop cultures like this will help shaping public perception about vitiligo faster than public education on its own. And then to be able to fight stigmatization and to promote awareness, we need to leverage on our influencers' voice. We have lots of influencers in Nigeria. We have the musicians, the actors, lots of them. I think they all need to come into this matter and publicize it as best as possible. We have a Nollywood in Nigeria, and I think we need to there needs to be a representation in Nollywood as well. They need to bring it to limelight. And for us also in LICDA, we are looking at a way of adding the study of vitiligo into schools, maybe starting from primary schools to secondary schools, maybe adding it to their curriculum so that from the very young age, people are able to, understand what it is. There was a time that HIV and AIDS was very popular in Nigeria. So one of the ways our government made us to understand what it is was they inculcated it into our curriculum then in primary school. So every child as you're growing, you already know what it is. So we are fighting to get that into our to get vitiligo being studied in schools so that children get to know it from a very young age. And then if our influencers get to also start talking about it, our actors get to start talking about it. And then I would like to add that vitiligo is beautiful. It is something everyone needs to understand. For me, I feel like vitiligo is God playing with colors. It's actually very beautiful. People with vitiligo are really beautiful. It's God playing with color. Imagine, having, yeah, I understand the stigma around it, but if you can accept it, it's not stopping you from anything. I used to tell the people in our community that your skin color is like this does not limit you from achieving whatever you want to achieve. What we need in our society right now is what is in your head, not what is on the skin. The skin does not define you. Your skin does not define you. So
Yeah,
thank you very much.
no problem. It goes back to Omar's tattoo on his arm, right? In a lot of ways, and
Yeah.
but you're so very right. The role of the public institutions for educate, like schools and things like that, can play a role, but there's nothing more powerful than having an influencer, someone that is respected, talking about something in a way that makes it normal. I personally, some of you may not know this reference, but back in the 80s when HIV AIDS was